Hey everyone, Kelly Dean Allen here with you again. So then, back in 1972, Richard Carpenter of the Carpenters wrote a soft rock love ballad for the band called Goodbye to Love that went to number 2 on the pop charts that year. Keeping it from going number 1 was the fact that many adult contemporary radio stations simply refused to play it, and those that did play it resulted in the band getting copious amounts of hate mail from fans. Why this was the case, you may ask? Well, it seems that many a fan had taken issue with the rather jarring, fuzzed-out guitar solo that Richard insisted on centerpiecing the track with. That, coupled with a 3 times as long outro solo to close out the track. Here's the story. You see, for whatever reason, Richard thought that a fuzz guitar solo would work a charm in the middle of this very gentle and easy listening ballad that he wrote for the band. So he and Karen called in a player that they were both familiar and impressed with, one Mr. Tony Peluso, and asked him to join them in the studio to put down a few solos for this track. Now, Tony, being very familiar with the Carpenters' music and not really wanting to get in the way of the track's rather laid-back nature, initially he put down a slow, quiet, and easy on the ears guitar solo when it came time to lay down his parts, only to be greeted with Richard Carpenter's rebuttal upon first hearing it with, no, that's not what I want for this track. I want this solo to burn. I want you to just go off and rip out a guitar solo. No more of this gentle, laid-back stuff. Tony, of course, did what he was asked for the main solo and doubly so for the outro solo. And that seemed to please Richard and Karen Carpenter, as this would remain the final cut for the track. Now, what the Carpenters basically did here was create what many consider to be one of the very first power ballads. Because you see, before this track, there were of course ballads, and of course there was power. However, the two musical disciplines rarely crossed paths before 1972's Goodbye to Love. That said, the Carpenters took no small amount of critical heat for this guitar solo decision, with many fans accusing the group of selling out their sound to hard rock. Which is quite funny in hindsight, actually, because going forward, selling out in a musical sense usually would mean the exact opposite of what the Carpenters did here with Goodbye to Love. Regardless, what was somewhat shocking and controversial at the time, at least in Carpenter circles, the track Goodbye to Love has become a timeless Carpenters classic, with the solo itself considered one of the best and certainly one of the most unique guitar solos of all time. That said, let's close in here a little bit, show you guys how it's played, shall we? Alright then, how to play this solo, Goodbye to Love by Tony Peluso and the Carpenters. We are in standard tuning for this one, soloing in the key of B flat major. Now, I read somewhere that Tony Peluso was actually in open F sharp tuning for this solo. I don't know how true that is, but we're going to learn it in B flat major. That seems to be the typical way of playing this solo. Using the B flat major scale, a lot of it in this position right here. B flat major, right, starting on the root note here, 6 of the low E. And finishing on the root note of 6 of the high E. The opening lick to this one goes like this. Now, there's lots of little chromatics in this solo as well. It's predominantly B flat major, but there's lots of little passing notes and whatnot. So we're starting on the 3 of the D string with our ring finger. We're going to pick that, slide it into 5, and then go off to 2 of the G. Kind of like that, right? Now, coming off that 2 of the G, we're going to drop onto 4 of the G, slide it into 5, back off to 4, and then back off to 3. Right, little chromatic run there. And then we're into this with more chromatics. We're going to go 4 onto 5 of the D and then 6 onto 7 of the G with a little slide. And then just back that up again chromatically, back to 6, back off to 5. Right, and that's the opening of the solo. Now we're going to take this 5 of the G string, we're going to go 5, 7, 8, and slide into 10. Kind of like that. Back to 7 with your index, and then slide it with your index back into 10. Now we're going to pick this 3 times, and then you're going to do a little hammer on from 10 to 12 back to 10. Right, and then we're just going to back it up to 8, back it up to 7, back it up to 5. All with your index. And then when you go back off to 5, you're going to pick that twice, hammer back onto 7. Jump up to the 7 of the D, right back to the 7 of the G. So from here. Pick it 3 times. Kind of like that, right? And then we're into this. Off to the 5 of the G, up to, 8 of the D, and go 8, 7, 5 of the D string, back onto 8, slide out of it. Kind of like that, into this, right? Grab the 3rd fret of the D string, pick it 3 or 4 times, hammer on to 5, down to 5 of the G. On to 5 of the G, back off to 3. Then we're going to drop back onto 5, give it a full step bend, pick it 3 or 4 times at the top, and then release it off to 3, back onto 5, back off to 3. Right? Let's take it from the top, up to that point. Right? And then we're into this. So we're going to slide into 7 of the G and then ride down the 6s of the B and the high E. Right into a full step bend on the 8 of the high E, and you're going to release that back off to 6. Kind of like that. Then you're going to take your ring finger, which is kind of sitting on this 8 here, you're going to back it up to 5. Into that. So you're going to grab that 5 of the high E right into a full step bend on the 5 of the B. Then you're going to give it another little bend release off to 3, back onto 5, back off to 3. Right, and then we finish the solo with this. So we're sliding kind of a nice slow slide right into 17 of the D, and then we're going to get down to 15 of the G, and then string skip down to 15 of the high E. Kind of like that. Right back to the 17 of the G, little bend release off to 15, grab the 17 of the D, back to 15 of the G. And then we finish with this. So we're on this 15, 17 of the G. You're just going to hammer onto 17 back to 15 twice. And then the second time, take that 15, slide it back to 10. To finish the solo. And that's how you play that one. Let's take it from the top, nice and slow. It's a pretty slow solo to begin with, even though, like I said, it created a lot of controversy back in 1972 for the Carpenters. But nice and slow goes something like this. And there you go. That is how you play the solo to Goodbye to Love by Tony Peluso and the Carpenters. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video, found it helpful and maybe entertaining. If you did, please hit that like button right down there. Maybe drop me a subscribe if you haven't done that already, as that would be very kind. Hope you're well out there in your little guitar corner of the world, wherever that may find you, and we will see you next time. Cheers.